It wasn't a war that lasted 100 years. It lasted 116, a century of kings, betrayal, shifting alliances, and a teenage girl who would change the course of history. This is the story of the 100 Years' War, the epic struggle between England and France for the crown, power, and destiny itself. Did you know the 100 Years' War was not 100 years long? It was longer. It stretched for 116 years, a vast and sprawling conflict. The fighting began in the year 1337. It did not truly end until 1453. This was not a single unbroken war that raged for over a century. Instead, it was a series of brutal campaigns and violent clashes. There were long periods of uneasy truce in between. These were not years of peace, but years of waiting for the next storm. The war was a dynastic struggle between the ruling houses of England and France. It was a fight for the greatest prize in all of medieval Europe, the French throne itself. It was a saga of kings and knights, of peasants and saints. So, why did it all begin? The first major cause was a dynastic crisis. In 1328, Charles IV died without a son, a power vacuum. Edward III of England saw his chance. His mother, Isabella, was Charles's sister. Through her, Edward claimed the French crown. He argued his bloodline trumped Philip of Valois. The French nobility rejected him. They invoked Salic law, no inheritance through a female line. They crowned Philip VI, sparking rivalry. Edward's ambition became a cause for war. The second cause was land. English kings still held territories in France, remnants of the Angevin Empire. The most important was the Duchy of Gascony, rich land, famous for wine. The French saw it as a threat and wanted to absorb it. English kings, as vassals, refused to give it up. That created constant friction and legal fights. France often tried to confiscate Gascony, giving England a reason to defend it. The third cause was economic, money and trade. Flanders, in the Low Countries, was a textile powerhouse. Its weavers depended on English wool. England needed Flanders as a market. Flanders needed English wool. The French crown wanted control over Flanders. Meddling there could choke England's vital trade. For Edward, protecting that trade was national security. Those three causes, the dynastic claim, the disputed lands, the economic rivalry, created a perfect storm. Each was serious alone. Together, war seemed inevitable. The throne claim gave a noble reason for conflict. Gascony gave a practical battleground. The wool struggle raised the stakes for merchants and commoners. Pride territory ignited the 100 Years' War in 1337, beginning a century of devastation and change. This long war was defined by its larger-than-life characters. It all started with Edward III of England. He was ambitious. He was charismatic. He was ruthless. It was his claim to the French throne that lit the initial spark. He was a skilled military strategist who led his armies in person, seeking glory and cementing his power. He created the Order of the Garter and fostered a new sense of English chivalry and purpose. Edward's reign saw England achieve stunning early victories, establishing a reputation for military might that terrified the French. He was the architect of the war, a king whose personal ambition plunged two kingdoms into a century of conflict. His legacy is one of brilliant leadership and devastating warfare. Following in his father's footsteps was his son Edward, known to history as the Black Prince. He was the very model of a medieval warrior prince, feared on the battlefield and celebrated in England. The Black Prince was a military prodigy. He commanded English forces with tactical genius, winning decisive victory at Crécy, and most famously at Poitiers, where he captured the French king himself. His reputation was immense, a symbol of English martial prowess. However, he was also known for his brutality, such as the infamous sack of Limoges. The Black Prince embodied the chivalric ideal, yet also its dark and violent side. He died before his father, never becoming king, but his legend as a great commander was already secure. Generations later, the English cause was revived by another legendary figure, King Henry V. He was a determined and pious king, immortalized by Shakespeare. Henry renewed the English claim to the French throne with vigor. In 1415, he led a tired and outnumbered army to an almost miraculous victory at the Battle of Agincourt. The war was punctuated by several key battles that changed its course. The first of these was the Battle of Crécy in 1346. Edward III's English army, composed largely of infantry and archers, faced a much larger French force of mounted feudal knights. The French charged again and again, confident in their heavy armor and noble status. But the English longbowmen unleashed devastating volleys, cutting them down from a distance. The longbow, with its range and rate of fire, proved superior to the French crossbow and nullified the charging knight. Crécy was a tactical revolution. It announced that the age of the armored cavalry was beginning to wane and that a well-disciplined infantry could dominate the battlefield. 10 years later, in 1366, the English won another staggering victory at the Battle of Poitiers. The Black Prince, leading the English forces, found himself cornered by a massive French army led by their king, John II. Using a clever defensive strategy similar to the one at Crécy, the English archers once again wreaked havoc on the French knights. The battle ended in a total rout of the French forces. More importantly, King John II of France was captured on the field and taken back to England for ransom. The capture of a monarch was a catastrophic blow to French prestige and stability, and forced it to sign a humiliating treaty, surrendering vast amounts of land to the English. Perhaps the most legendary battle of the entire war was Agincourt in 1415. King Henry V's small, exhausted English army was intercepted by a gigantic French force. Trapped and outnumbered, the English seemed doomed. However, the battlefield was a narrow, muddy field between two woods, which limited the French advantage in numbers. As the French knights advanced through the thick mud, they became easy targets for Henry's longbowmen. The result was a slaughter. Agincourt was a colossal military disaster for France, with thousands of its nobles killed or captured. The victory cemented Henry V's reputation as a great warrior king and opened the door for his conquest of Normandy. It was a triumph against impossible odds. He was so successful that he forced the French to name him as the heir to their throne. As Shakespeare imagined him saying, "Once more unto the breach, dear friends, once more." The tide finally began to turn at the Siege of Orléans in 1429. The English had been besieging the strategic city of Orléans for months, and its fall seemed imminent. The loss of Orléans would have shattered the remaining French resistance. It was at this desperate moment that Joan of Arc arrived. Her presence, her faith, and her fearless leadership completely transformed the morale of the French soldiers. She led them in a series of bold attacks on the English fortifications. Within days, the seemingly impossible happened. The English abandoned the siege. This was more than a military victory. It was a psychological one. It proved that the English were not invincible, inspiring a French resurgence that would ultimately win the war. Her presence revitalized the French cause and led to Charles's coronation. Though later captured and executed, her legacy was immense. She famously said, "One life is all we have, and we live it as we believe in living it." Joan became a symbol of French resistance and national identity. When the fighting finally sputtered to a halt in 1453, the map of Western Europe looked very different. The English had once controlled vast territories, even dreamed of uniting the two crowns, but were left with only the port of Calais. Their continental ambitions were shattered. For France, the war was brutal but unifying. Expelling a foreign invader forged a new national identity. People saw themselves not as Burgundians or Gascons, but as French. The king emerged as a symbol of the nation, his authority stronger than the feudal lords. The war marked a military transformation. The era of the feudal knight was ending. Crécy-Agincourt showed disciplined infantry, and longbows could beat knights. This changed society as well as warfare. It broke the nobles' monopoly and lifted the common soldier's status. Late war saw gunpowder cannons and sieges. Stone castles and armored knights became obsolete. Both kingdoms were transformed. England turned inward and looked to the sea. Defeat fed the Wars of the Roses. France's monarchy came out stronger. A standing professional army and national taxation became tools of the king. Feudal order fell away, paving the path to a centralized monarchy. The 116-year conflict was more than battles. It helped end the Middle Ages and usher in the modern era. It created new identities, new forms of government, and new ways of waging war. Heroes like the Black Prince and Joan of Arc and a deep cultural legacy remained. From dynastic squabble grew two modern nations, their identities shaped by conflict. The long fight was over, but its echo never truly faded. From crowns and castles to heroes and martyrs, the 100 Years' War reshaped medieval Europe and gave birth to legends that still inspire us today. Which side would you have fought for? England or France? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more battles that changed history.